Hi, this is Uncle Matt's D&D Studio. I'm Matt Finch, and if you play Dungeons & Dragons, and especially old school Dungeons & Dragons, please hit the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel, and now we'll move on to the video.
Okay, great. Well, so on this one, we're going to talk about, let's take your basic dungeon master who, let's assume, has done nothing really with terrain except maybe they've used a plastic battle mat and moved figures around.
Okay.
And they're thinking to themselves, okay, well, I can get this more interesting than just using a marker on my battle mat. And so I see various possibilities out there. There's printing stuff onto cardstock and making things out of it. There is going to Dwarvenforge and buying myself pieces, that are pre-made. I can go to Fat Dragon Games and I can get files that I can use to print on my 3D printer. Or I can go to Hirst Arts and buy molds that can be used for plaster. Now, to my mind, each of those actually has various advantages and disadvantages, both from the play and the cost and the amount of effort and so on and so forth. Where do you think, what are your thoughts about those various different ways of putting terrain together and where Hirst Arts fits on the various spectrums of what's good for this, what's less good for that? How do you...
Well, it really depends. It depends on what kind of gaming group you've got. Usually, in my experience, you've got one guy and he puts on the games and he's usually the guy with money. Okay, so he's the fellow that's got a larger house that you can actually go and play at. And he usually, puts up the money for the game that you're going to buy. But, he may not necessarily be the crafty type, And so usually what happens is, you're playing, but there's usually one guy or a couple of guys in there that they like doing the craft projects. It's like, and keep in mind that Hirst Arts is a craft project. So if you hate doing craft projects, I don't recommend that you buy the molds and but if you don't mind it, you can actually get a pretty good result. So it really depends, using the molds and actually doing, dental stone or plastic castings, you can do quite a bit with it, but you cannot do everything with it. Everything has kind of got its place. In other words, if I wanted to do a ladder, well, you can't get a ladder out of a mold because it'll break. Well, it's like, well, you really need to do that out of plastic, or you need to do it out of kebab skewers, or you got to do it out of something else. There's a lot of times that when you're going to have to cover a whole table with something, I would recommend printing it out. And then you've got your whole table covered. I wouldn't recommend, making 1-inch tiles and covering your table with 1-inch plaster tiles. And it's like, well, it depends on what you want. But to me, that's like, wow, that's a whole lot of work that, if you print it out or if you take it to a some place that does the large format color printing, and you get a big file and they will print out a 3-foot by 2-foot of the landscape for you, and you just roll it out, lay it on the table, and you play your game. That's the way to go. If you have the money, Dwarvenforge is really nice. The only thing I didn't really, the problem with Dwarvenforge is that a couple of things. One, it's nice that everything is done, and it's done well. Dwarvenforge, I think, is probably the top as far as nice terrain that you can get. But it's expensive. But, if you've got a guy that's putting on the games that has money, he doesn't mind putting out the money for it. That's not a problem. But
yeah, absolutely. The quality on the Dwarvenforge stuff is just tremendous.
It's really nice. You can't dispute that. And all the work's been done. I mean, they got people who paint it that make it look good. So, and you're paying for it, but you're getting what you pay for. One of the downsides is that you don't get to make things exactly like you want them. You pretty much got to take their pieces and arrange them, and that's all you got. But I have found in most cases when people are playing a game that what they do is they work their game around what they got. It's like, well, they're supposed to go down steps to the altar here. It's like, well, we don't have any steps. Well, okay, well, we'll just put the altar over here. We'll still play our game. It'll just be, not quite the same as the book, and nobody really cares. You always find a way to make the stuff you got work for what you're going to do, either through house rules or some other way to do it. But the other thing about Dwarvenforge is they have to sell several thousand of a particular run to make it worth their while to get that done. And what happens is after they sell it, That's it. You know, it's like you go to the website and you go to the store and it's like, well, this is sold out. That's sold out. That's sold out. Well, geez, I wanted a couple more hallway sections, but sorry, you'll have to get them used on eBay, because unless they can justify doing another run of 10,000, whatever it is, you're not going to get it again. The advantage of my case is that I can always make these because I make them myself. So if there's anything I run out of, well, you know, I'll just make more. You know, I don't have to depend on large runs in order to get it to happen.
Now, remember what we're talking about here. When he says I can make more, he's talking about you, not just him. That's the you as the hobbyist can continue to make the hallways. It's also true, you know, he can't, but yeah.
But yeah, as far as the molds, you know, it's like, you know, I won't ever be sold out of a mold that you can never get again. I can always make more molds because, you know, I've got what I need to be able to do that. Now, as far as the paper printing and fold up, what is it? There's a lot of nice stuff there too. And, you know, no matter what you get 3D dungeon wise, storage is always a problem. It's always a problem, whether it's my stuff, whether it's Dwarvenforge, whether it's paper stuff that you create and fold up. You know, everything's got its place. If you don't have a lot of money and you've never really tried it before, the paper route's not a bad way to go. It's not a bad, you know, and there's a company called WorldWorks, and I think they're still going. I don't know if they closed shop or not, but they had some really nice print your own. You know, you just bought the file, you downloaded it, and you could print it from your printer. One of the downsides is I've never been able to get quite as good of a print from my printer as what you can do professionally on a printing press. So, you know, no matter how good your printer is, you know, if you buy the package of Dungeons and Dragons that's printed on an actual press by professionals, it will always look better. It'll always have brighter, sharper color. It'll have a varnish on it that'll hold up over time. You print it out of your printer, hey, it works. And we all do what we have to do to play the game that we want to play. So all of these, you know, kind of have their place. As far as, you know, comparing like which is better, well, there's none that's, I'd say, really better than the other. It just depends on what you want to do. You know, I like my method, and the reason I did it my way is because this is what I want. This is what works for me. You know, it's not going to work for everybody, but I think it's a darn good system. But I'm not sure if that really helps, you know, put the spectrum out there or not. But
I think it does, because I mean, I think, you know, my answer on that whole thing would be about where Hirst Arts falls is, you know, number one, it's very cost effective if you want to do the crafting. I mean, it's the very craft centric approach, because, like, you know, you were talking about, you know, with Dwarvenforge, it's great, but then I want to make my own statue, and so you make your statue and it looks like crap next to the, you know, the highly detailed stuff. And so it's like, depending on how, you know, if you are the person who really enjoys the craft side of things, then you're going to get the flexibility with the Hirst Arts. You're going to be able to make things look the way that they want, that you want them to look. You know, that's probably your mode if you're really crafty. And then if
you know, you kind of have to understand that, you know, the gaming is evolved in such a way that, you know, I think Games Workshop, I don't know who really started it, but the first time I noticed it was with Games Workshop. They not only had a war game, but they had a way that they started into the crafting area, because you had miniatures now that you could paint. Now they got tutorials on the website of how you paint these miniatures. Now they got tutorials on how you can build stuff from cardstock. There's a whole crafting end to the gaming that never really used to be there, you know. So it is very craft related on a whole lot of different fronts. And, you know, I have always liked the crafting end of it, you know, and in relation to board games and making my own stuff, because, you know, sometimes for me, there is stuff that I want that just doesn't exist. You know, that's where it really comes down to it. You know, you picture this stuff in your mind. You picture this thing in your mind. It's like, oh, oh, this would be so cool. This would be, I can picture, you know, this layout of this thing, and this is how it's going to feel, and this is how the gameplay is going to feel when we do it, and everybody's going to go around the table, and they're going to go, oh my God, this looks so, you know, and it's like, okay, how do we make this happen? How do we actually make it become a reality? You know, and so you have to actually create something from nothing. And that's where, you know, I try to get people into the crafting end of it, because I'm never going to make everything that they need. You know, they're going to have ideas of their own. Well, it's like, there's no mold for this. Well, of course not. There's endless amounts of stuff here. You have to learn to kind of make your own stuff. And part of the Hirst Arts website is trying to get people in to make their own stuff. And that's why I've got a little, you know, I've got a few pages on sculpting. I've got a whole section on mold making, where you can buy the silicone rubber, make your own mold, and then you can cast up as many as you want of the stuff you made. Even on the, I did a board game called Wayward, and on that, I was trying to get people to see how they could actually themselves do what they want, because this is kind of making a board game from nothing. So the point is to, you know, they've got these ideas, or at least the way it works with me is, you got this idea in your head and you want to get it out there, and you feel like you're trapped. It's like, how do I get this idea out? So the whole point of the Hirst Arts website is to give people a way to slowly kind of learn to make things on their own, and to make molds on their own, and create stuff that's like, okay, we've got this board game, I want to throw something a little different into it. You know, it's, I want coffins here and there, but nobody has coffins like this. Or, you know, it's like, here's a way that you can actually make it. But yeah. But that's kind of the whole point of, you know, the website and what I try to do.
And the other thing too is that, you know, it's a good point to remind, since we're talking about the crafting, that it's not hard either. So, you know, for your basic, you know, dungeon walls, it's not like you have to say to yourself, you know, I am a master craftsman, I can, you know, therefore I need the Hirst Arts. It's like, no, it's just, you have to be willing to learn how to pour plaster, which takes 10 minutes or less. And, you know, you have to be willing to make several mold casts, and then it's after that is the point that you become addicted in things like, how do I now make a sarcophagus when there is no sarcophagus mold? And that's when you start doing stuff with toothpicks and X-Acto knives and all kinds of not being able to stop, you know.
And you know, some people, it's like any crafting hobby, you start at least with this process with the molds, all of the texture work. You know, all of the texture work is done for you, and that's really the hard work. It's in exact sizes. So those two things, the nice texture and the exact size, are probably the two most difficult things to do on your own as a hobbyist. Gluing stuff together is not hard. Painting stuff's, it's not hard. I mean, you get better at it. You know, if you think back to that first model car that you made, you know, you had all the pieces out and you had the tube of glue, and then it was the first one you did. And, you know, the first time you put the windshield in, you kind of slobbered glue on the windshield a little, and you got, you know, it's like, when you got done, you built a car. It's like, oh, it worked. I actually built a car. I can't believe it. I just followed the directions and I did it. And the next time you do it, well, you know, you kind of cleaned up the stuff from the pieces a little better. You actually did a little of your own painting. You actually were a little bit neater with the glue when you do, you know. So a hobby kind of evolves a little bit. You get better at it. You kind of forgive yourself for not really getting it right the first time. And that depends on your personality. You know, some people are, it's like, well, it's got to be perfect or I'm not doing it, you know. Some people are that way. Other people, you know, it's like, it's okay. It's okay. It'll get better, you know. But that's part of the, you know, that's part of the crafting hobby. And that's what this is. This is a crafting hobby, you know. The other thing I kind of want to mention in relation to this, you know, the molds, one thing that we didn't mention was the 3D printing. Are you still there?
I'm still here. Absolutely.
Oh, okay, I didn't know. But there's some people, I've had people that have written me and they said, you know, why don't you have your blocks? Why don't you have STL files of all your blocks? You know, it's like, you know, you could just, you know, sell the files and you don't have to make molds anymore. You could just do that. Well, there's a couple things about that. Everybody, or not everybody, some people think that's like, well, the mold's just going to eventually kind of go out the window. It'll be replaced by 3D printing. Some of it will, yes. As far as 3D printing goes, my opinion, it's wonderful for prototypes. It's excellent for prototypes. It's wonderful for things where, you know, I only need 2 of these. You know, I need 2 treasure chests, or I need 2 tombs, or I just need 1 big spider. You know, I need a big spider for this thing, and nobody's got a big spider. But if I go on to whatever that website is, where they can you know, download it and they can print out a big spider, and then boom, on your table, I got a big spider. You know, this is great. 3D printing is wonderful for that, and people are submitting their own stuff, and it is going to take off. And you know, if you complain about the resolution, it's going to get better. It's only going to get better, and printing is only going to get faster. That's just what happens. But when you need to mass produce something, molds are still the best way to mass produce, because some dungeons they have available online where you can download it and you can print out, you know, a hallway section or a chunk of dungeon or whatever. And, you know, like I said, the texture is going to get better. But, you know, to try to print out, you almost need to make a mold of the thing. You almost need to glue it down to a piece of plexiglass, put a wall of Legos around it, mix up mold making rubber, and then, you know, cast 6 at a time. Yeah. So you can actually cover your table with it. But, you know, as far as 3D printing goes, I will probably never put scans of my blocks on, because, you know, by the time it really gets around to that, I'm probably going to be so old that I'm not going to care. You know, I mean, once my eyes go, you know, and my hands are going like this, and it's like, oh, crap, you know. So I will probably just continue to do it the way that I've been. I mean, I'm 54 right now, and once I hit probably 65, I probably got another good 10 years of cranking out some nice stuff before, you know, things start going downhill. So I'm going to make the best of it while I got it. But I don't think I'm really going to get involved in the 3D. I think the next group that takes over the crafting part of it into the 3D is going to carry that on. It reminds me a little bit of, you know, oil paints and then Photoshop on the computer. You know, Photoshop is an excellent program. A lot of artwork has a combination of oil painting and Photoshop. And I learned Photoshop, and I created the Wayward game, you know, by hand sketching and using Photoshop. And pretty soon the 3D printing is going to be kind of integrated and involved in this the same way as Photoshop was involved in, you know, oil paintings and art and those sorts of things. So it's an integral part. It will never go away. It's only going to get better and more involved. But there are still things that it's just easier to make molds of and faster to mass produce as far as making molds are. Anyway, yeah, that was just
one thing to, you know, you mentioned it in the earlier video that we were doing at the very beginning, just sort of introducing Hirst Arts, but the plaster that's used with Hirst Arts takes about 25 minutes to set, and you take it back out of the mold again. So when we're talking about mass producing things, you're comparing the amount of time it takes to print something on a 3D printer versus 25 minutes and you're done, you know, and you're recycling it through. So that's the kind of time cycle, and the reason why, you know, if what you want to have is just a huge number of dungeon walls, you want a huge number of them, you got 2 choices. You're either using paper and printing it out, or you're going to be using some sort of molding. And so, because it'll take you, you know, forever on the 3D. So,
and the other thing is, you know, as far as moldings, you know, a lot of people, if they're really doing it on their own, they will make their own molds. In other words, what they do is they'll assemble a very large section and make a mold of that whole big section. And then in one casting, they've got a whole room. Or they'll buy, you know, 2 or 3 molds, and they'll cast 4 up at a time or 10 up at a time. So in that same 25-minute time frame, you've got 10 molds worth of all, you know, these different blocks that you can, you know, do instead of just one. So the mass production, I do have to mention one thing. I do encourage people to make their own molds, even of the blocks, but there are some limitations. Molds that you make from my sculpture, are for your own personal use. So you can make molds of them if you want. You can build whatever you want with it. That's perfectly fine. But I don't allow people to sell or trade the custom molds they made from my sculpture. That's one of the limitations that I have on it. I do encourage you to do that because it's the best, most efficient way to actually create what you want to create. And that's the whole point. That's the whole point of this whole thing, is to make the stuff that makes your game table great, that makes your game time fun. I mean, that's why it's here, you know. But anyway, that's part of the hobby. That's part of the mass production of it. So you can actually make the things that you want to make.
And then the other restriction that you've got is that people cannot sell unpainted just blocks. They can't just take their mold.
Just blocks. And that's one of the things. If you have something that you painted, there's no problem. Sell it on eBay. That's fine, you know. But if it's just cast plain blocks, I have to put a limitation on that because I have licensees, and then what they do is they pay a royalty for how much they sell, and then you got other people that are just selling stuff that's unpainted just to make money, because you got to admit that if you're just selling plain blocks to make money, you're not actually having a craft hobby out of it. You're not actually creating something and selling something you create. You're just cranking out blocks, you know. So if you're going to just mass produce it to make a buck, then, you know, I should have some say in that. I should have some control of what you're sort of doing with the sculpture that I made. Now, if you sculpt your own stuff, hey, that's free. You know, it's perfectly yours. You can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah, that's what you did.
Yeah, but anyway, that's kind of the only limitation on that. And I've really, you know, it's funny. I've never really ran into problems with it. You would think after 18 years, people would, you know, have taken it badly, that, you know, I actually put up rules to some of that, but people are really good about it, you know. And it's kind of funny that, you know, as far as selling plain castings, I never really look to see if anybody's doing it. I usually get emails from other people saying, hey, somebody's selling these. Are they supposed to be doing it? You know, it's like, okay, I'll look into it, you know, but people, it's actually the fans of it are more worried about it than I am. You know, it's kind of funny. It's not like I really have to watch anything, or usually it's my licensees that go, hey, does this guy have a license? Because, you know, I'm seeing like 10 auctions on eBay where he's just selling these casts, and I look him up and go, oh yeah, he's going by this eBay name, but this fella actually is a licensee. He actually files, you know, he actually done the stuff he's supposed to do, so it's fine. And so I really haven't had any problem, you know, with that at all.
You mentioned something that I always like to ask people about, and that is their fan bases, because they're, you know, virtually everybody I talk to, even if they're like a small blogger, you know, on a particular topic, everyone's got their fans, and a lot of the time they don't even know it. So did you, and you have a very large fan base. Do you ever think it's unusual to find yourself in the situation where, as a sculptor, you have an enormous fan base?
Yeah, I don't know how enormous it is. I think a lot of people have heard of it, but it's a little weird, but it's not too bad. I mean, every year for the last 10 years, we've gone to Gen Con. We've set up a booth. And, you know, people will come by occasionally and say, yeah, I like your stuff, and they shake your hand and that sort of thing. But, you know, it's not really, there's a lot of, you know, everybody in that booth. You know, you got hundreds and hundreds of booths, and they all have people that like what they do. You know, so, you know, you don't really kind of see yourself. You only worry about what you want to do. Sometimes you do have to balance your projects a little bit between what you want to do and what people want you to do. And you've got to kind of work those two together, because, you know, some people on the message board will say, it's like, you know, you really got to do some Aztec stuff. You know, I'm dying for some Aztec. And some people say, we need to get some, you know, Japanese. I want some Japanese castles. And other people will say, you know, we really don't have anything sci-fi in this area. You know, you really should do that. You know, you should work on that. And so I've got, you know, kind of a really large list of possible projects I can do. So I try to, what I try to do is work in what people want with something that's kind of on my mind at the time. Because, you know, occasionally I'll break the rule and it's like, you know, nobody wants this. but I'm going to make it anyway because it's driving me crazy. I mean, I can't sleep because I've got to write these ideas down because I want to do it. And making the robots for Robo Rally was one of them, you know, because I did Robo Rally and I did these set of 3 molds that would make 12 robots. And it was a crazy project. You think, well, and people, you know, of course, they're in the background and you're thinking, oh, God, he's working on a robot project. And, okay, it's going to be like 5 months before he gets around to what I want to do. And it's like sometimes it's like, you know, I didn't really sell many of those, but I just had to do it. And I enjoyed making that project. And so then I go back and say, okay, what's kind of the hot topic? What do they want to do? The trick is that I've got to have some good ideas for it, though. It's got to be something I'm at least into a little bit.
Yeah, because you were that was what was going on with those Cavern molds. Because I ran into the Hirst Arts for the first time, and the Cavern molds weren't out. And I think you had just taken a stab at doing them, and I believe you scrapped it and were like, I don't like the way this is turning out. I'm starting over on it. That was sort of when I joined. What was the story on that?
Well, the Cavern ones, what I tried to do is like, you know, Dwarvenforge had kind of come up with a nice Cavern one, but I wanted one that was a little more modular that you could do more with that, you know, because I envisioned in my mind that you would be nice if you could stack up, you know, because some things until you actually work with it and figure it out. So what I did is I tried to make them in a way that they would interlock with each other, or the sides of each piece would be textured so that they would fit into each other. Just so they would close up and you wouldn't see that line between it when you did it. And so I tried to, you know, work around. And when I got done, it looked like kind of a rat maze. It looked like this kind of hedge maze, you know, going all the way around. And when I backed out, it was like, this looks awful. Oh, God, you know, it's like, well, this totally is going nowhere. So it's like, I can't do this. I don't know the answers to this problem yet. But I had to come back to it, and later I figured out, well, you know, it's not a good idea to make all your walls line up. Instead, let's just back up a little bit, and let's just make it a landscape where we're filling areas. We're filling areas with, you know, filling the 1-inch squares here and there, and we've just got stalagmites sticking up. And we're just going to put them around here, so it'll kind of form a maze, but, you know, each wall section is going to fill that whole inch. And then, you know, if you got these stalagmites going together, well, they kind of make an L shape. And this one does a wall. And then, you know, and then when you back out and look at it, you go, yeah, that did it. That worked. It doesn't look, you know, they had to be separate little bits, you know. And just because one wall wasn't completely separated from the next wall, that's okay. You know, people, as long as they know that, you know, I can't move my fella from here to over there, then we're good. So that's kind of one of the things you really, there are certain problems that you have to overcome. You know, you've got this, like, this is what I want to make. Okay, this is what I want to make. So, you know, you think you have to, sometimes when you solve a problem, you have to fix it by changing the problem, you know, because I'm trying to find an answer by doing it this way. And you know what? It's not happening. It's just not happening. This does not work. So sometimes you got to back up and say, well, I got to rethink the problem. Well, maybe the problem is not making continuous walls. Maybe the problem is making it feel like a cave. Okay, well, if I change it to solving that problem instead of making walls that connect, let's make it feel like a cave. So you try different things. Let's solve that problem. And then if you can solve that problem, you go, yeah, okay, I can build with this. I can rearrange it. I can make what I want. You know, most of those projects are kind of that way. Let me think. I think I had, let me grab something real quick here.
Yeah, if you can take any time out you need to, because what we can do is we can edit out. I mean, if you go and, you know, want to go get something, we can cut that time.
Well, I mean, I got it on a table sitting right over here. Let me give you as kind of an example of this. Oops. Let's see, where did I have that? Okay. Let's try this. Let me give you an example of kind of the problem solving on here. I'm going to move the camera around. At one point, what I wanted to do is I wanted to make, let's say, I wanted to do some steel beams, some steel girders. And because I wanted, like, you know, the Space Hulk game. Oh, that's another game. I didn't mention that. I
Space
really
Hulk,
like
yes.
I really like Space Hulk. And so I made the whole board for that. But there were times that I wanted to do like the steel beams, the steel girders. And you think, how can you build with something like that? I mean, a castle's got blocks, right? You can stack up blocks and make a wall, but you can't stack up steel beams and make a wall. It doesn't really work. So, you know, I tried for a long time to figure out, how in the world do you make steel beams work? How do you do that? So, and eventually it's weird how it happens. It's like one day I was just sketching, you know, and what I did is that I kind of figured out a way to actually, let's see if we can do that. I actually make something, you know, some pieces that were kind of block-like, but kind of steel beam-like. And so it's like, you know, to do it, to make bridges and make other things with it. So what I've got here is I've got just the pieces. And what you do is you have blocks that have a steel beam feel to them. Now, no one is actually going to build a bridge that looks like this, but that's not the point. The point is to try to create something that feels like a steel bridge, that's got the elements of a steel bridge, but are still in blocks that you can actually build with. So, you know, I was really happy the way these turned out. And it's funny, you know, it's like you struggle with this for, like, you know, you bring it out and you struggle with it for a week and you go, oh, forget this. This ain't going nowhere. And then sometimes you know, one time you break out the pencil and paper and you're sketching some ideas, you know, and your mind's just kind of going blank and you get in the zone. It's like within an hour, I had most of these pieces just sketched out. And it's like, holy cow, I don't believe that. That's just crazy, but it worked, you know, and it worked really nice. I was really happy with this one.
Yeah, that is a nice little interlock. I don't do any modern gaming, but I like that.
But the trick is, like, you know, what pieces actually express the feeling of steel. So you kind of look at things that you had, you know, like railroad bridges, or you know, what kind of shapes do they use, and how do I make these shapes kind of relate to each other? And so that was, you know, that's kind of a fun little puzzle. It's kind of a little puzzle solving element to try to do that. And like I said, I was just really happy with how that one came out. But, you know, not everybody's interested in steel. And that's kind of another related point. I'm not really all that popular with model railroaders because they are really picky about scale and time period. You know, if they wanted to build a railroad bridge with this, they go, well, you know, in the 1930s, they never made them this way. You know, it's like, well, yeah, true, but I don't care.
In the wargaming community, we call those people the rivet counters.
But yeah, it's just that, you know, as long as it expresses the idea, does it feel like what it's supposed to feel? And that's what matters. You know, you're able to build what you want to build fairly easily, and it expresses that feeling of what you wanted to do. You know, that's what the art of it's about. So, I mean, that's, and occasionally you get surprises like that happen. It's like, yeah, you know, I need a few more of those type of things. And, you know, it really, having a winner occasionally, at least what I feel like is a winner, it's just really nice for it to work out. But anyway, I just thought I'd just, you know, show that one there. Yeah,
no, that's great. Seeing the sorts of problems, you know, that you start with and are trying to solve in the process, you know, that's interesting stuff to hear about. So, all right, is there anything else that you would like to say about the company that I may have left out that might be important to people?
Not really. Just some basic things. Like I said, we run this from our home. It's just me and my wife. That's the whole business. We list our phone number on the website. So if you have questions, you can call us. You know, at first when we put it on the website, people said, really? You put your home phone number? Oh my God, no one should ever do that. But it's never been a problem. You know, I'm not encouraging you to call me to yak or anything, but if you've got any questions, feel free, you know, to call and ask, you know, pertinent questions. But you know, in an email, you know, I usually answer the emails every day. Every day we send out molds. So if you place an order, the next day usually we send it out. And here in the U.S., it takes, you know, 2 to 3 days to get it to you. I can do express mail if you got to have it the next day. So if you got a school project, you know, Johnny's got to build a pyramid.
I was wondering who on earth would ever be doing the absolute expedited shipping, and you've just told me now why it is you've got that option. Is Johnny's school project?
Yeah, that's what they did. Oh, Mom, I forgot to tell you it's due in 2 days. You know, so that's the reason that we have that on there. But you know, or some people, they got money and they want it now. Hey, that's not me, but you know, that's perfectly fine. But that's really about it. So keep in mind that anytime you do the molds, I make all of these myself. So every mold that's out there is done by hand by me. The orders are processed by my wife, Joanne. She does the books. She does the taxes. She does all the horrible, slow, awful office work part of it. And I get to do the making part of it. And so that's it, you know, that's pretty much the business. And when you look at it, it's like, wow, this must be a big business. It's like, not really. But, you know, there's a lot of them that way. A lot of businesses are that way. I mean, you know, you buy battle mats. It's like, wow, this company's got battle mats. Well, this company is one guy, and he sends it out to get it printed, and he handles everything. So there's a lot of niche businesses that deal with like Dungeons and Dragons and board games and all that. Even game companies that do board games, you don't realize there's only 2 people running this company. And that's all there are. One guy does all the artwork and the other guy does the sales and promotion. And, you know, that's the whole business. You'd be surprised at how small a lot of these businesses are. And it's nice, you know, you can call them up and actually talk to the guy who designed the thing, you know.
Yeah.
But that's all I can kind of think of that way.
All right, great. Well, Bruce, thank you so much for being on the show. Say goodbye to all of your fans.
Oh, just one last, if you're wondering about the horse head back there.
I wasn't going to ask about the horse head, but yes.
Well, actually what that is we had played a game. Have you ever heard of Letters from Whitechapel?
I have heard of it, but I have not played it and don't know what it is.
It's a board game. It's a board game where you're playing Jack the Ripper. And you can't, you know, you have to kind of kill somebody and then find your way back to your lair without anybody seeing you. So you've got to look at the map, and nobody's got to know where you're looking. So the way it works is we made the little hat, you know, so that you can put it on and nobody can see where you're looking on the map when you're actually trying to write down what your coordinates are, because they don't know where you are. So
that's great.
Hence the hat. The horse head is actually, that one is for when we play the Bang Dice game. If you're familiar with the Bang Dice game, that's where you're cowboys and you're rolling dice to one guy's the sheriff and the other people are the outlaws and one's a deputy, and you roll dice to try to kill people, but you're not sure if they're an outlaw or not. So, you know, as the game progresses. So the first guy that dies has got to wear the horse's head. So that's basically how we do that. So if you don't want to wear the mask, then you got to stay alive. But that's what it's for. These are mostly props for games that we just have fun with. I'm filming this sort of in the game room that we do. So, but anyway, that's I'll put this thing in so I can hear you again.
Okay. Yeah. No. We did the same thing. We had a great game of Illuminati that we were playing one time, and it was just one of those games where it never seemed to end. It was always right on the balance, kept on going, and so everyone started getting more and more serious about it because, you know, this was the game to have won or not. And so by the end of it, this was in the 80s, there were about 6 of us sitting around the table. Every single one of us had gone out and found a pair of those mirrored aviator sunglasses. And so you had 5 people sitting around with the mirrored sunglasses so that you couldn't tell where they were looking. Yeah. Same principle going on there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Bruce, thank you so much for being on the show. And I will say to everybody, no matter what kind of Dungeons and Dragons that it is that you play, imagine the hell out of it.
All right.